Hi, it's Matt. This is our latest episode of Political Rehab, which was previously recorded.
Not what we voted for. It's not leadership, it's self-preservation, and no amount of messaging can hide that.
The number of people who buy into this, the need for Republicans to protect Trump on it will diminish as well.
None of us want these rent-a-cops with machine guns.
Now you're cooking with bacon. My only question for you, are you selling your nuggets? Welcome to Political Rehab, smart politics without the hangover. I'm Matt.
And I'm Matt.
In this episode, a Venezuelan puzzler for Republicans, a growing hit list for America, the incredible shrinking House majority, the world's shittiest bromance is back on again, and a tragedy in Minnesota, national repercussions. But let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump.
That's right. It's time for the Trump dump, our weekly segment where we get it all out of our system up front, because it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. There's something Trump did this week that pissed you off.
My Trump dump this week sounds at first like it's not about Trump at all, but really it is, and I think you'll agree. This week, in HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s most sweeping anti-vaccine move yet, the CDC announced that it will stop recommending 6 vaccines, about a third of the total vaccination schedule for many babies and kids. Now, the Department of Health and Human Services framed the change as aligning with recommendations in other countries like Denmark, because apparently we now love Denmark so much that we need more of it in our lives, like Greenland. But medical groups said that's an apples and orangutans comparison that makes no sense at all. Doctors say that Kennedy's changes defy science and are dangerous for children. But the thing that drove the internet crazy was this statement from Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana and a medical doctor. He says the vaccine schedule is not a mandate. It's a recommendation giving parents the power. Changing the pediatric vaccine schedule based on no scientific input on safety risks and little transparency will cause unnecessary fear for patients and doctors and will make America sicker. First of all, Bill, no shit. 2025 had the most confirmed measles cases this country has recorded since we officially eliminated the disease in 2000. RFK is undermining vaccines based on his weird personal psychosis, including, and I'm not making this up, that he doesn't believe that germs cause disease, which is the scientific equivalent of believing that the earth is flat or that Sarah Palin is intelligent. American kids are getting sick and dying, and you, sir, were the swing vote that confirmed RFK Jr. RFK is only doing what for decades he said he would do, and you knew, and you voted for him anyway. You bear the same moral responsibility as a bartender who serves a visibly drunk customer and then gets into a drunk driving accident. But second of all, we would be blind and foolish if we left out the other responsible party here, and you see how I'm bringing this around full circle. Donald Trump's devil's bargain to get a few more votes by teaming up with this insane person and then following through and handing him immense power with no restriction that he could at any time impose as president means he's ultimately responsible. Trump has made deals with literally thousands of people that he welched on, all documented, and yet he cares so little for Americans' health and well-being and our very lives that this is the one deal he kept. And since then, to every insane idea that's come forward from RFK, he's just shrugged and said, sure, whatever. Trump has never taken responsibility for a single bad act in his life, and I don't expect him to start now. But let's never forget where the buck is supposed to stop, especially as the disease and death that this will cause keeps rolling in.
Wow, fantastic. A lot that happened this week. And so I struggled on where I was going to start on this one. But earlier this week, Trump spoke to House Republicans for 84 minutes. He said a lot, but this line jumped out at me.
You have so many good nuggets. You have to use them. If you can sell them, we're going to win.
This isn't a messaging problem. It's not that Republicans just aren't selling his agenda well enough. No, Trump has a reality problem. That is what's hurting Republicans. When Trump is telling Washington everything is great, Americans are living in something very different. Affordability isn't a hoax. It's a reason elections are won and lost.
But I wish you could explain to me what the hell's going on with the mind of the public.
Well, since you asked, let me help you out. This is not what we voted for. We voted to get the economy growing again. We voted for a government that gets out of the way and protects our rights and freedoms. We voted to fix the immigration and secure our borders. We did not vote to occupy foreign countries. We did not vote for troops in American cities. And we sure as hell did not vote to have masked ICE agents shoot and kill American citizens. We literally fought a revolution 250 years ago, in part to stop exactly this kind of abuse of power. Free people are governed by consent, not force.
But you got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, I mean, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
And there it is. That's why this pisses me off. Look, I know he just said the quiet part out loud, but none of this is about the country, the Constitution, or conservative principles. This is all about Trump. That's why he's governing by decree. That's why he's using force. That's why he's tearing the country apart. It's not leadership, it's self-preservation, and no amount of messaging can hide that. It's just lipstick on a pig.
Fucking A, bro. Now you're cooking with bacon. You brought the heat this week. My only question
Trump
for you is,
right?
are you selling your nuggets? That's really the question for Republicans. So with that, let's get to this week's rundown. Since you invoked it, we are closing out this week about how we started it, focused on Venezuela. On Thursday, 5 Senate Republicans sent a clear and stunning rebuke to President Trump by voting to advance a war powers resolution that would block the president's use of the U.S. armed forces to engage in hostilities within or against Venezuela unless authorized by Congress. Trump responded with an enraged Truth Social rant, saying that Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, Josh Hawley, and Todd Young should never be elected to office again. How are Republicans talking about, thinking about, processing, worrying about behind closed doors this Venezuela attack?
Here's the interesting thing. I think capture Maduro is probably the most traditionally Republican thing Donald Trump has done since he's been in office. But the issue is the contempt he seems to have for the American people. The moment we start blowing up narco-terrorist boats, he should have been on television. If the president believed this was necessary, he owed it to the country to give a clear public explanation. Instead, we got shocked without context. And if it stopped there, I think Trump's approval numbers probably would be going up, much like George Herbert Walker Bush's did. But the problem is we're not stopping there. We're going into a country, and now we're saying we're going to run Venezuela. We're saying that it could be years of oversight. I'm not sure many Americans think that he can run our country, let alone another one. I was asked this by a couple of reporters this week, and I think the thing that strikes me is if you are a Democrat or someone who just hates Trump, you're not voting for him. If you're just a Republican who feels politically homeless, but you can't make yourself vote for a Democrat, you're angry, you're upset. It probably kills us in the midterm electorally, but it's those people in the middle. It's the independents that are looking at this and just saying this is a real. So how are Republicans looking at this thing? We think this could get our ass kicked in the midterms on it. I think that's why you see 5 senators who vote to restrict Trump's war powers on this.
There is some polling out in the wake of the attack. A third of Americans expressed support for the operation. A third said they disapproved, and a third expressed no opinion. They are literally waiting to see how things go and see how they feel about it and see what new information arises. If I were in your shoes, which I am analytically, I would be worried for the Republican Party because we just don't know how this is going to go, how it's going to wear in the coming weeks and months. Trump promised that we would be running the country potentially for years, and history suggests that it is not going to go well.
And that's why our next topic comes into this, because Trump has threatened Cuba, he's threatened Mexico, he's threatened Colombia. I'm sure the Panama Canal's next. We know about Greenland. The reality of it is the base is fractured, and we have some real problems that are brewing out there that just don't pinch things for most Americans, and it puts Republicans at risk. I guess the question is for you, the Don Roe doctrine. I know how it fits with us as Republicans. First of all, I think it's a horrible pun. For a guy who's supposed to be smart on marketing, that's a horrible name. But how do you see this playing out?
I think that the Don Roe doctrine is going to go the same way as trumped up trickle-down economics and Bidenomics. Not a great marketing campaign we've got here. I think this is mostly a case of Trump's usual go-to move where he blusters and he acts like a chicken hawk and throws a lot of stuff out there. And it's basically just to get people to come kiss his ass, which is precisely what happened this week. In a surprisingly warm phone call with the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, who Trump spent the last week insulting and threatening him and saying, "You're next, buddy." And now he said, quote, "It was a great honor to speak with the president of Colombia, who called to explain the situation of drugs and other disagreements." He explained, "I appreciated his call and tone. I look forward to meeting with him in the future, and to the present I am going to receive." Meantime, I will say that 9 Republican senators have publicly come out against this insane Greenland thing. To me, it's not a doctrine. I'm not saying we shouldn't take it seriously, because Venezuela was a half-baked Trump idea until it wasn't, and it became real. There's always a chance with Trump that any of this could become real. But I think the thing most likely happening here is he's just casting around for more presence.
It's interesting. I've seen a lot of Trump supporters out there say this is how Trump negotiates. This is art of the deal stuff, that all he's doing is throwing out the wildest thing out there and hoping that people sort of respond. But see, to me, I think this signals a fundamental shift in who we are as Americans. We went from this idea that with great power comes great responsibility. Now we're out there wanting to take over the entire Western Hemisphere. And I think that's dangerous, not only for our party, because I think we lose elections. I think it's dangerous for us as a country, because it fundamentally is not who we are.
It's not really also what the Republican Party aspires to be. And speaking of which, one thing that they have always aspired to be is the party in power. And that is looking more and more tenuous this week, as we had the unfortunate death of one member of the Republican majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, and the retirement of another, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who we have spoken about at some length on this show. Matt, I'm going to ask you to put your GOP campaign operative hat back on. What effect will this razor thin majority, they're now down to 218 to 213, what effect will that have?
Oh, it's a game changer for the way this year works. I mean, and you know this, but for our audience, one of the things we do in election years is we start to use the legislature to promote something we want, or we put in the poison pills in there to try to get the Democrats to vote against it. So we can say, you hate little kids, and look, you voted against it. They're all messaging bills. That's exactly right. But with such a slim majority, you're going to have a tough time getting those messaging bills through. I mean, we can barely cobble together enough people to hold a quorum in some cases, because we have people who can't make it in time. There's some special elections coming up where I think a Democrat's going to win at the end of this year. So that or the end of this month, that margin's going to be even a little bit tighter. And I mean, I don't think Mike Johnson loses the gavel. I don't think the Republicans are ever going to give Hakeem Jeffries that gavel. But what it means is that during the summer, when we're starting to gear up for it, and we're trying to fundraise off of legislation, and we're trying to put those pieces out there to make that compelling case and a compelling argument, we simply don't have the bodies to do it. And I think the next question, and it's just the big unknown, is how many other Republicans are going to retire this year, and how thin is that majority going to be?
Yeah, you brought up 2 things, and I'm going to lard 2 things on top of them. So you're talking about the prospects for messaging bills, for positioning bills. There are always votes where the party in the majority is trying to put the party in the minority on the spot with difficult votes that they can bring back in 30-second ads in the fall. That's going to become harder to do because they can't hold together their own majority on some of these controversial issues. You also brought up how thin the margin is. And look, we talked last week about the prospect for further retirements. We both agreed that we're going to set the record in the cycle retirements from the House. We could see yet more. We saw Republicans speaking wistfully of Marjorie Taylor Greene's ability to retire and just get out of this whole ugly scene. We could easily see more of that, which would put Republicans on very thin ice. I'll just add more discharge petitions, more forcing Mike Johnson to do things that a small number of Republicans and the vast majority of Democrats want to do. But there's always the chance of ratcheting up the prospects of impeachment.
Which brings me up to another interesting story this week. We saw Elon Musk, I think he was New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago. Now, this was a very public breakup. I don't know if this is Ross or Rachel, but I guess my question for you, Matt, is, does it matter that they're back together again? What do you make of the sudden reemergence of Elon Musk?
I think the answer to the question depends on the backstory here. And as you alluded to, this started with the blossoming of the bromance in Elon Musk's support for Donald Trump and the Republican Party writ large in the 2024 campaign, where he was one of the largest, if not the largest, donors to the party, hundreds of millions of dollars to a pro-Trump super PAC and other Republican campaigns, which led Trump to appoint Musk to head Doge, which led to Musk trying to beat it out of town and on the way out calling the one big beautiful bill a disgusting abomination. Trump responded that he was very disappointed in Elon. Musk pointed out on Trump, hey, you wouldn't have won the election without me, so fuck you. Trump said, we're going to cut off all your contracts, and said, you have Trump derangement syndrome. Musk said, you're just saying that because you're in the Jeffrey Epstein files. And then Musk said, I'm going to form a new party. And then Trump said, you've lost your mind. You've lost your mind. Then Musk said, I don't know, maybe I regret some of what I said. Maybe I went a little bit too far. Maybe it's the contracts. I don't know. The point is, this brings us full circle to where we started, which is, does this matter? Is your question? Yeah, the prospect of the world's richest man once again being inside the tent pissing out instead of the other way around, and being able to give hundreds of millions of dollars to Republican efforts. Yeah, that could matter. That could be a potentially big deal.
I agree. As a Republican, I think we'd much rather have him on our side than against us. And so the fact that he maybe is back in the fold, it raises a whole bunch of ethical questions. Let's not dance around that one. But from a pure strategy standpoint, I'd rather have his money helping me out than against me. I've run enough elections. I know enough times that you stare down millions of dollars, sometimes just hard to win. So if nothing else, he was going to be a spoiler in an election year that I think we are already going to lose, as I predicted, 50 seats last week. Maybe that only makes it 40, but it makes the path a little bit easier if we can ever get our head out of our ass.
We had a horrible tragedy this week, a terrible incident, the killing of 37-year-old Renee Good by an ICE agent. Renee Good, for the record, is not, as Donald Trump described her, some kind of a far left, radical left terrorist. Well, like Kristi Noem said that she was a domestic terrorist. She's actually a mother of three and a devout Christian. There's video that shows bystanders watching and heckling ICE agents. A truck pulls up, a driver and a second agent jump out, rapidly approach an SUV blocking the road, which was driven by Ms. Good. The driver appears to tell her to get out of her car. The SUV reverses, starts to move forward. A third officer runs in and fires several shots. And this led to a circling of the wagons by the Trump administration, calling the victim here, as I mentioned, a member of the radical left, a domestic terrorist, to which Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said, this is bullshit. So once again, we have a horrible incident resulting in tremendous political division. And I guess my question for you is, since we both view a lot of this ICE brigade as political theater, is this a tragic, horrible case of cheap political theater gone terribly wrong?
Yeah, 100%. Look, we also have to throw this in the context of the ongoing assault on the governor, the fraud allegations, the attacks Trump made on Somali immigrants. This week, the House is investigating all the fraud. I saw the Minnesota Speaker of the House say the amount and level of fraud is going to be staggering here. So you throw this whole powder keg together, and I think what we really had here was Trump, honestly, wanting to walk in and be tough. They thought this was the nice 1-2 punch. Walz already said he's not seeking re-election, largely due to a lot of this. And I think they were in the streets this week because they saw this as another political opportunity to show they have strength. And it went just horribly wrong. Look, I think most Republicans want to see ICE agents go out and find dangerous criminals who are here illegal. And I think probably most Americans feel that way. But none of us want these rent-a-cops with machine guns. There is no reason this should have happened. And what makes it worse is this should not be a partisan issue. We get told a lot by the reaction that came out of the White House, because instead of going in and saying we're going to investigate, and if this ICE agent acted inappropriately, they will face the full consequences of the law. They will be fired. They will be charged criminally. The first thing they did before even talking about investigation was how she was a domestic terrorist. She's not a domestic terrorist. She may have been a protester, but in America, that is guaranteed by the First Amendment. It's there for a reason. And there is zero reason why somebody should have come in, and that this is what happened, and it shouldn't be partisan. Every American should be angry about this one.
It reminds me of where we started in this episode with my Trump dump, where I took Senator Cassidy to task for basically saying what happened here is so terrible, so tragic, just awful. And he's the one who enabled it. We all saw this coming. When you are going to spend billions of dollars rapidly staffing up an agency that's a law enforcement agency like ICE, you're giving them very little training. You're putting a gun in their hands. You're putting a mask over their face. And you're saying, go here. Hundreds of motorists who have been shot by U.S. law enforcement. This is already something that's frowned upon by experienced law enforcement that knows what they're doing and still happens at baseline anyway. And now you've brought in tens of thousands of ill-trained yahoos who are being told, yeah, just go out there and act tough and here's a gun. So of course we could have seen this coming, and the buck stops with Trump, who has set this entire thing in motion. That's where the responsibility lies. And he's such a venal coward. I was talking to my sons earlier this week about when you make a mistake, the mature thing to do. I may have said, this is how you act like a man, but it doesn't have to just be a man. This is how you act as a responsible human being, is you stand up and you say, that's my fault. I take responsibility, apologize. And you're able to at least move forward. And there's none of that in the case of Trump. So this is his responsibility. Yes, he set this up and he put it in motion.
And I get the gut reaction by Republicans to try and defend law enforcement. But to defend law enforcement means you also have to hold them accountable, because one bad actor is a stain on the entire force. And I guarantee you that the good ICE agents, the good people there who are not just there to shoot people, are looking at this as a tragedy. Now, I believe it's actually in the DHS handbook that you can't shoot motorists.
100% correct.
So he wasn't following procedure. And I'll give one closing thought, because I hear this from Republicans a lot. She was resisting arrest. Okay, maybe she was. Maybe when that ICE officer came up to her car and said, you have to get out, she shouldn't have fled. Okay, that doesn't give you the right to shoot her. It doesn't give you the right to shoot and kill her. They did not follow procedure. This is 100% wrong. And Trump should have been on national television last night talking about the tragedy of this, not calling her a domestic terrorist.
All right, we're going to move on to our 5 good minutes segment to talk about another Trumpian tragedy.
Let's go on a deep dive.
This week saw the 5th anniversary of the January 6th assault on the Capitol, which is rightly and legally called an insurrection, although I understand that there is some disagreement across the political spectrum on that. And we wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about the lasting legacy, if there is one, of January 6th, because the public perception, the way we treat this politically, has radically evolved over the last 5 years. And you can see it in the political activities that went around this anniversary. There was the launch of a new White House website with ominous black and white images of former Speaker Nancy Pelosi and members of the January 6th committee, offering a false narrative of what happened that day, labeled those who stormed the Capitol patriotic Americans. Oh, I see. Meanwhile, despite a law that says that there's supposed to be a bronze marker legally mandated by Congress, again, that would honor those who protected the Capitol, police officers, from the worst attack it had seen since it was burned in the War of 1812. He has avoided that. He is not following the law, and he has not put up that plaque, which again is not taking sides here. It is just honoring the 140 police officers who were injured in defending the People's House that day. Democrats were relegated to the basement of the Capitol to hold a mock hearing to mark the anniversary of the event. That's notable in its own right. So we've ended up in a place where there is really no shared understanding of the event. There's no national mourning. This isn't like September 11th. This isn't like, hey, we were attacked. This can continue to unite us, even if we don't like what subsequently happened after that. So with all of that backstory in place, what is Matt, the lasting legacy, if any, of January 6th?
Yeah. First, I think it's important to talk about Mike Pence here. I think it's important to set up how far we've gone from the very foundations of our country. America depends on principled leaders doing the right thing at the right time. I mean, without that, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, everything else is just a piece of paper. I think where Mike Pence should really get his due is he showed that same level of commitment in the face of immense pressure during the certification of the ballot. He took his oath of office seriously. He took his job as an American, as a vice president, as someone who is trying to advance our country along seriously. And I think the fact that Trump tried to rewrite that, because on that same website you talked about, he talked about him more as a criminal, as someone who stood in the way of America. The true story of Mike Pence, whether you agree with him on policy or anything else, he should be seen as an American hero, as a patriot. Maybe it's not Mount Rushmore type stuff, but what he did is just as important as those people who signed the Declaration of Independence 250 years ago.
I want to endorse that. I agree as a Democrat. And I agree politically with Mike Pence on virtually nothing. But I can tell you that people who are a lot further to the left than I am, I've had on my show over the years, who I've talked with over the years, we all agree that the Republic came within a few strands of nerve fiber in Mike Pence's spine, and he deserves the praise that you just gave him.
And I think too many people in my party, too many Republicans who are out there speaking too much want to call him a traitor. Now, I think the dirty secret is most Republicans out there still look at him as a true conservative, as a hero, as a patriot. The second point that I think is important to understand here is that if this is not the father of the lawfare movement, this is at least a distant cousin. The idea, right, that we could fundamentally change how we view government, to say that there's an active approach inside government that is attacking us, that just fermented for 40 years, that just created a further distrust. That's a real tragedy too. I think that's a lasting legacy that comes out of it. Truth has been destroyed by those who want to minimize what's real and recreate an alternate history. And what I find interesting is for my Republican friends who say, look, they weren't protesting, they were walking in line, they were orderly. No, like they disobeyed an order to not enter the Capitol. Going back to Minnesota, it's the same argument you're making on why this ICE agent was justified in his actions, because somebody else disobeyed. You can't have this both ways. And that's the next legacy of January 6th, is that we want to gloss over the illegality of what happened. I am sure some people just got caught up in the moment, but that doesn't change what they did was illegal. And so it is a tragedy in American history.
To me, the lasting legacy, the thing that history will have to judge, is the pardons. It's pretty horrible that Trump chose to pardon all of the insurrectionists. I just hope people will never forget that the first pardon that was issued by Mitch McConnell, it was the refusal of the leader of Republicans in the Senate to convict Donald Trump in the second impeachment. If Mitch McConnell had shown the same backbone that Mike Pence did, had rallied other Republicans to go with him, don't forget that 10 House and 7 Senate Republicans voted against Trump in that impeachment. 7 Senate Republicans. We were not that far away. If Senate Republicans, rallied and led by Mitch McConnell, had said, this is such an obvious case of an impeachable offense, he should be convicted, then we wouldn't be living through the nightmare that we're living through now. Your party would be healthier. America would be healthier. We'd all be a lot happier. But they didn't. And I don't want to absolve fully the role of the American people in all of this, because we're the ones who issued the second pardon. We're the ones who collectively voted Trump back in. We made the decision with all the evidence laid out in front of us, that we were going to memory hole this and move on and bring him back. We did that. It's a democracy. We did that. And we bear the responsibility for it. And so that is part of the lasting legacy, is Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans' shame and all of our collective culpability in allowing this to happen to ourselves. We did this to ourselves.
Yeah.
But
and if I may add one thing, and it's the amnesia of those Republicans now, this many years later, guys like Josh Hawley, who you see the video of him running scared through the Capitol, who now just casually dismiss that.
yeah, Mr. Stands with a fist.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all like your Breakfast Club impersonation. But look, to be potentially a little bit more positive on this, there are dead enders who are going to always carry a torch for the idea that this was, as Trump called it, a day of love, that these were peaceful visitors, that they were just marching, that all of this was a deep state illusion. There are people who will continue to buy into that conspiracy nonsense forever. But I also think that the number of people in America with a vested interest in buying into all of this against all fact, evidence, and reason is going to diminish over time, because they're the people who have a vested interest in their own kind of fortune and political survival because of the existence of Trump as a political force. As he diminishes, this force, I believe, will hopefully diminish as well. The number of people who buy into this will diminish as well. The need for Republicans to say this as a shibboleth, to give a nod to it, to protect Trump on it, that will decrease as well. And in the long run, with history as a judge, I think January 6th will stand out in all of the ways that you mentioned at the top. I think it will be remembered very differently in 20 years than it is right now. And that's what I'm hoping for.
And to close with one thing, the truth is, Republicans, everyday Republicans, it's what they feel. They don't see this as a day of love. They don't see this as something that was right. They are angered by this. We watched our country under attack. We watched our capital under attack. And we watched our president turn his back on the American people and hope that his vice president was hanged. American people, Republicans, they're not necessarily going to stand up against it yet. But I think, to your point, when we look at this 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you're going to see a dramatically different view of this. And it's not my dose of hope, but I think that's where we are.
Speaking of ending on a high note and moving toward the dose of hope, which we always finish with, let's move on to a slightly cheekier segment. It's our weekly That's Bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
A bullshit?
In the wake of the recent attack on Venezuela and abduction of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, it's easy to forget the preceding controversy.
Donald Trump ordered a series of controversial military strikes on boats. Many in Washington are questioning whether these strikes are even legal. So far, the U.S. has released no concrete evidence publicly linking the boats to drug trafficking or terrorism.
The bottom line is that the bombing campaign was a very, very questionable legality. And then this happened.
The U.S. military carried out a follow-up strike on September 2nd after becoming aware of survivors in the water. The sources tell us that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had ordered the military to ensure everyone on board was killed. It could violate the law of armed conflict, which prohibits the execution of an enemy combatant who is taken out of the fight due to injury or surrender.
So a group of congressional Democrats who are military and intelligence veterans issued a video with a clear reminder.
You all swore an oath
To protect and defend this Constitution.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
That led our brittle chicken hawk of a president, Admiral Bone Spurs himself, to go absolutely ballistic.
President Trump accusing the lawmakers of seditious acts that is, quote,
punishable by death.
And as Secretary of Defense General Hair Gel to throw a performative tantrum aimed at U.S. Senator and Navy veteran Mark Kelly.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is censuring Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly.
The Defense Department has started proceedings to demote Kelly's military ranking of captain, which would mean a pay reduction if it goes through.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says that the Pentagon will cut Senator Mark Kelly's retirement pay.
But this is the world's easiest form of bullshit to identify, hypocrisy bullshit, because astute observers on the internet pulled just a few clips of Pete Hegseth singing a very different tune.
The military's not going to follow illegal orders. And so the Trump campaign was forced to change their position and say, we're going to try to change the law so that the military can operate within the law.
There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield. And I do think there have to be consequences. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders.
Sometimes you have to go digging to find this kind of thing or connect the dots, but this bullshit just writes itself.
Hey, I that might be your best one. That was fantastic.
Here's the sneaky secret. You suggested this one to me, so
that might be why I think it's your best.
Yes, exactly. All right. As threatened earlier, let's move on to our dose of hope.
It was a busy week, so people may have missed that Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced a new dietary guideline for Americans. My dose of hope this week comes from a place I never expected to feel so validated, the food pyramid. Apparently, after decades of telling us to survive on kale, rice cakes, and quiet despair, the experts have updated the rules. Red meat, not the villain. Eggs, they're back. Wine probably is good for you. Dr. Oz even said alcohol is a social lubricant that brings people together. Now, this is science, and I trust the science, which means, ladies and gentlemen, I have been living a cutting-edge wellness lifestyle for years. While everyone else was eating sad salads and pretending they love quinoa, I was out there enjoying a steak with a glass of cab like a rogue scientist testing the limits of human health. And now the government has basically looked at my dinner plate and said, you know what? Maybe it's onto something. If this new food pyramid is right, I'm not just healthy, I'm a pioneer, possibly a visionary. And statistically, I'm probably going to live forever. And that, my friends, is my dose of hope.
You know what? I'm so in awe of your dose of hope. I don't even want to give mine because it's so much more serious, but still, I'll go ahead. Look, I am not exactly a fan of artificial intelligence. I hope future robot overlords don't hear that I said that. But this week, there was a piece of AI news, a tool that could actually do some good in politics and government. Former Washington Post fact checker Glenn Kessler announced that he's been working in a partnership with a new AI investigative tool called SourceBase that can upload millions of documents and help journalists search them and make connections between them. It's already loaded up House oversight documents, court records, lawsuits, JFK and MLK assassination archives, the full U.S. code, 60,000 pages. So you know what the law says, and a searchable database of every Trump video appearance, so you know exactly what he's said about every topic. And of course, it's uploaded the Epstein files from the Department of Justice. And this is a good example. We just got one of the biggest document dumps in modern political history. The DOJ has started releasing files from the Epstein investigation, 125,000 pages so far, with 5.2 million more pages to go. And this kind of incredible volume of records has always been a major barrier for transparency, for the truth. It's a literal skyscraper-sized mountain of paper. Think of the famous scene in All the President's Men of Woodward and Bernstein combing through the records of the Library of Congress. That wall of paper used to protect people. It's like that scene from another famous movie ending, the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the Ark of the Covenant ends up in a warehouse in a sea of boxes, a treasure lost in the dust. This is where an AI tool becomes interesting, something that can filter through, make connections, and point tomorrow's Woodward and Bernsteins on the right path. Follow the money is all well and good, but it's even better if you know where to start looking. And now there's a tool that can say, start here. And it's not just journalists. Any citizen can ask, who flew on Epstein's planes? Who visited the island? What did JP Morgan know? And all kinds of other questions that require deep dives into lots of documents and connecting the dots. Now, it used to be that cloaking yourself in paper was a good defense mechanism, but for the first time in a long time, the massive information asymmetry may be actually working against the people trying to get away with stuff, not for them. I'm not trying to pretend that this is a cure-all. The tragedy in Minnesota this week showed that you can have an actual video of what happened. It still doesn't clear the way to the truth if people are determined not to see it, but it's still definitely a step in the right direction that we can help expose crimes and misconduct and corruption, even the things that we didn't know to look for. That is my dose of hope.
Fantastic.
I feel way more hopeful, but I like yours better because I'm going to go have a steak and maybe a hot fudge sundae. So on that delicious note for Matt, I'm Matt. We will see you next time.